the proposed community and cultural center in the Old Firehouse, and a conceptual master plan for the outdoor areas surrounding the building, and this includes the grove and all the way around the library. So my name is Sandy Stein, and I am the chair of the building committee. Our other members are Bob Tucker and Andrea Weinstein. Andrea, you can. All three of us are actually long-term residents of Woodbridge, and Bob is an architect whose firm is located in Woodbridge, and Andrea is the chair of the Recreation Commission and has served on other various commissions over the years. In addition to our building committee, we have our architects, Silver Petrocelli, David Stein, and Matt Gallerani. Both of them will participate in terms of the presentation. And we have Eris Stallis from Eris Land Studio, and he's the one who has done the exterior design for us. I just want to give you a brief overview of how we got to where we are today. And it's really important first that you know that this whole project is being funded through a state grant of $2 million. And although we don't have the construction costs yet, we're hopeful that we can accomplish the transformation that we'll share with you today with the amount of money that's been awarded to us. So our committee began meeting in May of 2022, and we solicited program ideas for both the indoor and the outdoor spaces from the library, human services, recreation, and the community council. And these program ideas that were submitted by each of these groups are the ideas that were given to the architects and our land use design experts to formulate the initial plans. And the creation of these spaces really has the potential to be transformational, we feel, for the residents of the town of Woodbridge and the staff employed by the town. And we believe that if these spaces are well designed, we're going to be able to provide multiple additional venues for town residents. Please come on in.
Well,
okay, to gather for organized events, social gatherings, impromptu get-togethers, hosting exhibitions, attending classes, performances, things that are rather difficult for us to do today based on the space constraints that we have. And so one of the key design principles that we gave to the architects for the interior of the building is that we wanted that indoor space to have flexible uses, as this type of design really facilitates multiple uses for many different types of activities that can then take place in the building. So furniture, lighting, color, and design will also be key to making the space functional and inviting. So one of the key design principles for the outdoor space is connecting all the different spaces that we have in the grove, outside the library, etc., with accessible, smooth surface walking pathways that are wheelchair accessible and that have excellent external lighting, as well as providing multiple venues for sharing activities outside. So we presented the initial schematics to the town department heads on November 16th and to the Board of Selectmen on December 14th. And we received very positive feedback from all those who attended and some really very good suggestions about what else to consider. So we'd like to present the plans this evening to the town residents so that we can get your feedback about the design and the use of the indoor and the outdoor spaces. So please know that we are recording this entire presentation, thanks to Nick in the back of the room, and it will be available for viewing on Channel 79 and WGA-TV YouTube for people who could not attend this evening. In addition, a PDF of the presentation will be available on the town website, and that questions, comments, and ideas should actually be submitted to Jerry Shaw at gshaw@woodbridgect.org, and I'll mention this again at the end of our presentation. We wanted to ask that you hold your questions and suggestions until the end of the presentation. It will make it easier for those who are watching to follow the presentation if we use that format. So I'd now like to turn the meeting over to David Stein, and we will begin the presentation.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see some faces that we're familiar with. So thank you for having us here. As Sandra mentioned, I have Matt Gallerani, the project architect, who's been working on this, and Aristolis, our landscape architect, who's also been teamed on this project. Some of you know we are also working on some other projects in town, and I think just the overall campus concept was important, and we wanted to really study that and look at it as a context, even though the specific work is we're trying to just focus around the existing firehouse and the adaptive reuse of that old firehouse. But we stepped back, and the aerial that we have in front of you just sort of gives us that bird's eye perspective of not only the vehicular connection and circulation between the buildings that you have and sort of that connection to across the street to the Fitzgerald property, but also the pedestrian connections that are there, and some of them are not very obvious in terms of their pathways, and that's what we are showing here in our green lines that are there. There are pathways that sort of connect its way around, but they're very sort of subtle in nature. The blue represents the vehicular connections, or the ingress and egress between the center building, and sort of that overall connection. And our existing, the old firehouse, the original firehouse, which is situated here, really is sort of your gateway to your town as you sort of enter in. Yes, you come from either side of Center Road, but in terms of the first real architectural presence you see, that building is really front and center, sort of on that triangular piece. And from there, we always knew that this was sort of an opportunity to transform a building that was once intended for an emergency service. It was originally built in the around 1920, late 1920s, early 1930s, and then there were two additions that were added onto that. But that sort of piece, as it's situated, as those sort of roads sort of go onto either direction, the architecture definitely is apparent, and it really speaks to being adapted to something different. It's really a natural progression, and it's questions that we all should ask is, what do we do with buildings that we no longer need? Some perceive they knock them down and build other things. That's not what we're trying to do here. The building has good bones to it, and it really is a natural building to adapt into a community building. We have done a few of these in the past. The committee saw that when they hired us. We actually designed two former fire stations, one in Manchester, which was part of the Cheney manufacturing plant and sort of their city-town fire station. That was adapted into a youth and community center. So the lower level, those bays, were adapted into open space, the upper for meetings and so forth. Same thing in Milford, over in Woodmont, that section of Milford, down near the water. We took that station, and that's part of the Woodmont Borough Community Center. So these buildings work well because of their open spans of sort of those bays that are there. They were built well, masonry buildings, but usually what's tired is sort of the envelope, the windows, the roof, and then the mechanical systems. This building has been modernized just 2 years ago as part of a previous grant that was received. About $500,000 was invested in the building, so we knew that when we were originally hired, we knew that we needed to at least infuse an enabling phase to get infrastructure into the building. So new mechanical units, roofs were repaired, electrical service was sort of upgraded and sort of teed up for infrastructure to come in no matter what would go in there. Fast forward to today, we now have a plan on what would go in there, and that was a good investment to sort of get this project onboarded and moving forward. The roof actually was replaced, and most of the windows were replaced when that fire took place 15 years ago, I guess is probably the time frame. right now. So those are all in good condition and has been well maintained. So the envelope of the building is in very good shape. Now it's sort of how do we sort of make that work and get to the inside. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions here. I'm going to save that for the design team to sort of answer. So I'm going to go through this quickly for everybody and then open it up to questions. I think that may be a great way of sort of bringing you through the presentation. But just looking at the site plan here, our thoughts were how do we make those pedestrian connections that you see in green? How do we now address parking? And how do the two sort of merge well? So this was our initial study of sort of analyzing that. What we have here on this curve is just the orientation of sun and just sort of positioning, okay, where do we want to look at things in terms of daylight and sort of that piece of it as it relates to the overall site. So we started breaking up the site, and these are all just overall concepts of a master plan of what could we do, the possibilities of what we could do to really interconnect all of these buildings and really enhance what we feel is missing in this. So I'm going to start in this box that's sort of positioned right here, where the firehouse is. We sort of label these Bay 1, Bay 2, and Bay 3. With that, we obviously now need to bring parking, because right now there's very limited parking. It was really intended for the first responders to come in. They could really park wherever they need to be as long as they weren't blocking their bay doors for the apparatus to leave. Now with the public coming there, we need to create some new parking there. And we already have parking that's sort of just positioned right out here. So the thought was to reconfigure that, create it in a way that's a bit more safe of a loop that brings us off of this connection, and then having angled parking that brings you to now an accessible entryway. And we'll talk more about this is the main entry of the building. Probably as you drive by, the question is, where's the front of the existing the old firehouse? Well, it's really sort of around the back and in the corner, and that was fine for the first responders, right? They come from different directions, they get out of their car as fast as they can, they run in the building, they get in their car, and they leave. This is different. We now need to define the entryway so you as the public fully understand where that is. So this plan looks at taking that opportunity and putting parking there. We also then wanted to sort of leverage that and say that now that the gateway is being here, what do we do in those old front doors? And we'll talk more about exactly what we're thinking of doing architecturally, but in front of that, which is usually called the apron for the trucks, and it's a fairly short distance till it gets to the road, the thought is that could actually become pavers and patio and an outdoor space. So those indoor spaces, those doors could be opened up, and if the weather is nice, people could sit out there. And now our environment, we all have learned this in the last 2+ years, right, is that outdoor environments it's an advantage, right? It's something that we're all sort of yearning for on a nice day. So this being a community center, you have the land to work with. So let's work with that. And that's where we're proposing a patio, and there'll need to be a retaining wall. We're also proposing a pedestrian connection, which would get you from the Fitzgerald property, and then it would work its way and navigate all the way across. There's already a plan that the town is looking for in terms of connecting a sidewalk, which allows for the Amity students to kind of walk through. So trying to bring this together and create some synergy with some other concepts that are being floated out there. So just having now a pedestrian connection can bring you all the way basically from Town Hall. You now have walking paths that get you directly and safely to the Fitzgerald property. From there, we're now looking at the area that is defined as the Grove, and this is really sort of that communal space that has plenty of opportunities. So these are just ideas out that we have proposed. Is an open free area that we see here in green that we're sort of showing in this sort of oval space. So a great place that people could picnic, kids could go out and play ball, you could throw frisbee, you could kick a soccer ball around, you could do those type of open activities that are there. We are proposing a pavilion which is located in the center. And we're also proposing a community garden that could be located here, bocce courts, and then there's some other elements that sort of fall in. You have your generator, you have some of your other pathways. But the thought is now there's sort of parking from either end, and depending on the events and schedules of what may happen at Center School, what may happen at the Senior Center, if there's an event here at the library, and then the event at the community, there's pedestrian connection, there's vehicular connection. We also then look at item number 2 that's positioned here, and the thought, and we'll go into some of the images that I'll show you quickly, is just within sort of this nestle of the building. It's really a perfect opportunity to also bring some landscape in there, and I'll show you some images, but we're also proposing an outdoor sort of amphitheater for lectures to be part of the library and enhance their opportunities to bring some of their learning outside and tied to that. So with that, I'll move on to sort of the first piece of it, and this is sort of the enlargement of what I presented. So you can see here in the larger image, the patio that's located up front. The thought is to have pavers that are positioned in terms of parking. Those would be impervious pavers, and what that really means is that we would be taking stormwater that would filter on through, so we want to eliminate blacktop because there's a lot of pavement there. So the thought is we'd have these pavers that acts as an infiltration and a good stormwater management system for that. And it just provides a much lighter feel as you're entering in. Any of our walkways and pathways would also have sort of a modular feel, much more of a lighter tone. It could be sort of the image of like brick pathways, but they can be sort of a system design as opposed to blacktop, which people tend to go towards just from a budget perspective, but those have implications with stormwater. We'd also like to create buffers, what you see in these images, and these are sort of concept images. This is actually a community center that we designed in Middletown, so it shows you some of those thoughts of how we could get landscaping the buffer from the road. So we want to create a good enough buffer, especially with that pathway. The bocce images potentially of the bocce and how we could sort of just nestle that around. We also want to think about artwork and the pathways, what could be brought into that. I think there's a lot of opportunities for that. And then a pavilion of something of this sort of size and scale that would be nestled there for events, and obviously during the summer just to get out of the heat, or if it's raining or so forth. Our next concept brings us into the part 2, just really around the existing library. In that center node, the thought is to do a pollinator garden, a nice area that people could walk, and pathways. People want to go out and read a book. These are great opportunities. Right now, you really don't have that. It's all internal. So if we could sort of extend these learning spaces outward, we really leverage the opportunities that the library would like to have. We're also showing just another concept image that you see to the top right. It could be as simple as just wood seats or concrete, something designed with this sort of amphitheater built into the topography, because there is a natural dip that's already there, so we would sort of work with the topography that's there. Or it could be as simple as just very passive looking and just sort of carving it with grass and keeping it fairly minimal in that regard. With that, I'll move on to the inside of the building and our programming. So as I mentioned, there are 3 bays. We have bay number 1, which is the existing. So this is sort of facing the road. That's the gateway of the original building that you see in this kind of magenta color. That was the original building, which was about 40 by 50 or so in its original proportions. The plan is that that bay would be adapted. It's an open span space. It has the flexibility of change, and that's probably the one thing that you want to do. You want this building to have is full flexibility. What we envision it today may change 10 years, 20 years from now, and we don't want to design it in a way that you now need to sort of reposition things. That's why these buildings are perfectly adaptable for that, because they're large open spaces. And as long as the mechanical units sort of handle that flexibility of that, they could change easily. So the thought here is this could be a lecture room just like this. These could be display cases. There could be exhibits for art gallery, installations, and any of that could just be brought in with mobile equipment and mobile furniture as it can move in and out as needed. But let's get back, I guess let's start at our new entry. So we are proposing a new entry, as I mentioned, parking sort of located up here, and a new entry into the building. There may be a welcome desk that's there for people to get greeted, ask for an event, find out about programming. So just somebody there that when you enter in, you see a face, you're able to say welcome. That would be an addition onto the building. That would then bring you into the building, the former firehouse, where there was a stair, and actually there was a hose area where they used to dry the hoses. We're going to kind of take advantage of that shaft, remove it, and put in an elevator, because we need to make this building, and all the pathways that we just showed would need to be handicap accessible. So that needs to get inserted into the building. We then would have new restrooms that would be positioned here, and those would be large enough to accommodate the large assembly that would be in the space. Bay 2 would then also have the ability for a multi-purpose space. This could be converted for yoga classes. It has that flexibility. We're considering putting a folding partition down the middle, so there could be two programs going on simultaneously, or that could sort of retract back in its pocket. It could be a larger room. So flexibility, as you see, is being built into this design. Behind the scenes, we have mechanical and electrical that's sort of nestled into the corner. And then what's sort of really exciting in this bay, which was once an addition and once had bay doors, is to convert this into a cafe. Maker space, a worker space that can be used by different people at different times, a very casual feel, a different type of learning, maybe a small meeting group or so forth. So we'll show you some images of what we were thinking in some of these type of spaces. A co-worker space could look like this with the exposed structure, because there's a lot of exposed, you see the steel beams up above, there's brick walls. I think we're going to work with what we have there and create sort of this open space that I think is really nice. We also want to use take away the old garage doors, put in new garage doors. Those would open up and they could move out to that patio in the front, the patio in the back, and just sort of extend those learning spaces outward. So these are just some inspirational images, and then just some test fits of what those spaces could look like, just depending on the different patterns of seating and so forth. We then have different lecture spaces or fitness areas, and the fitness could be hard equipment like you have with rowers and bikes and treadmills or things, or these could be passive exercise equipment that you see here with flooring that's adaptable for you to sort of change in and move on through. And then smaller lecture and gathering spaces that are much more casual or communal, where we sort of sit around almost like a fire pit, and the furniture and the color of that and the lighting design is all going to be all focused around sort of inspiring people to get together and feel comfortable and casual doing that. As you can see, it's an old firehouse, so there's a lack of formality in that we may have at Town Hall, right? Town Hall, there's much more formality in that. This gives a little bit informality with it, and it sort of ties into that original architecture, and people, I think, will feel more comfortable with that. When we get into that space of Bay 3, it's in the center. This is a cafe that we designed up in Kent, and it just gives that feel. It's very simple materials. The flooring, although looks like wood, it's a vinyl product that is very resilient, easy to clean, easy to maintain. So we'll be sensible with the materials that we're choosing. There can be cooking classes, so we know that in the center area that's here, this is a perfect opportunity for just display and culinary area that you could roll out and have culinary classes and so forth. And then up on the second floor, if you're not familiar, if I'm not sure anyone's been in the Old Firehouse, I know it's been decommissioned for many years, but this was the old meeting room in which they had their roll call and the members would meet. And it's a gorgeous space up in that mansard roof right now. It's fairly gutted, after the fire. But looking out with those dormers that are built in there, it's really a gorgeous space. We'll have a bathroom. We have 2 means of egress, so 2 new stairways, and then an office that's sort of nestled into the back for the operational piece. It could also be flexible and serve as a smaller meeting room. So the thought was that space could also be adaptable. It could be a yoga class. It could look like something like the image that you see up above, where we could redo those wood floors. We could bring in some nice daylight from those dormers, and then we could have a nice meeting room that's positioned there. This is a first concept pass of the architecture. It takes a bit of a modern twist to it, because what's interesting is because of this project was originally built in the 1930s, the state, and we are receiving state funding, we are under the purview of the State Historic Preservation Office. And in recent years, their thought is that when we are adding on to a building, that the addition of that should be distinct. It should look like it's designed today as opposed to sort of fully blending in. They want us to sort of hyphenate or punctuate that the addition is different. So we took a bit of a modern twist to that. And I know some question and say, well, I'm not sure that's Woodbridge. And that's okay. This is why we're throwing these early concept ideas. But it's to work with a sort of a metal panel, and it's to find that there is the entry there. So this is actually, this wall also serves as sort of a secondary purpose. We also need to fit the dumpster somewhere, and we're trying to nestle that. We also have the oil fill and the gas meter and all of that kind of stuff. We're going to sort of tuck in behind that little wall. We're opening up these bays, so here's those glass doors that we would open up, and that would go right into that culinary or cafe area. So you could start to envision that this now opens up, and there could be people sitting there with, on tables with umbrellas to sort of cover you, and it'd really be a nice space that's positioned there. So with that, Sandra hit on a lot of these bullet points before. I'll just quickly, if you want, I could just continue on through these last 2 slides. So in sort of culmination, what we're really trying to hit on the indoors is meeting spaces, gathering spaces, co-working spaces, the kitchen and the cafe, which really is a connector. Food brings people together, so that's why that is here. Exhibition space, which could happen in any of the spaces that you see there. This could be artwork, this could be sculpture, so forth. Recreation space, that could happen in any of the spaces that you see there. And then it needs an entry, it needs a welcome desk, it needs somebody that you come there that is going to obviously operate and manage the times that people are going to be coming to that. On the outdoor, we had a list of accomplishments, an outdoor pavilion, which we showed you, an outdoor amphitheater, which would be nestled in as part of the library, shady area for play. So there's a lot of trees that are there. I'm sure if there's questions, could talk about what he's envisioning there. Benches and seating, a patio for the bistro seating, which could be in the front or the back of the building. Library reading patio that you saw, picnic eating area, a butterfly garden, a sculpture garden, outdoor grilling area, parking, utility hookups for the food trucks. So that would be sort of nestled into the border of that. I don't think I mentioned that as part of that. And then the outdoor charging stations not only for cars, but also for phones and things, because we would envision that, unfortunately, when we have hurricanes and storms, this is a place that people come and nestle, and if we have sort of those amenities there, this outdoor spaces in that community sort of serve as a secondary support for people as they need it, if that infrastructure is planned as part of this overall master plan. And then lastly, just in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of capacity, so these are just some available spaces. Right now, the center building 16 has spaces for 42 people. Room 13, which is currently closed, can accommodate 36. The center main building has a room for 130, which is also under renovation, and the gym in maximum capacity. I'm not sure you ever really get to the 450 people, but it's at least designed for that maximum capacity. The library, as you know, we could fit 40 to 20 people in any of those other small meeting rooms. And then looking what we're trying to accomplish here in the cafe, it could be just 5 people sitting around having a cup of coffee, or up to probably 40 people would be its maximum capacity. The exhibit spaces could range also up to about 100 people, depending on if we nestle people pretty closely in chairs. And same thing with the rec space is about 50, and the lecture yoga space is about 50. So there's a lot of flexibility there to have a multitude of meetings, and I know that's a challenge for the town is, where can we have good meaningful gathering spaces? This obviously provides that for you. So with that, I'll turn it back over, and then our team is here to answer questions.
Thank you very much, David. Really appreciate that. So, we'd love to get your reaction. What do you think about what you saw? What do you like? What else would you like to see? That's really the purpose of us presenting to the public this evening. So I'm going to turn it back over to you. If you just want to raise your hand. Start.
Exciting, wonderful, and I love the cafe idea. I think that's wonderful. And
Okay.
what
Jean?
you guys gonna do?
I'm curious if the committee has visited some of the other renovations that they've done of similar buildings, and whether there's information available about how much utilization these different types of spaces get in a town like ours.
Right, so we have not actually visited the other projects that have been done by Silver Petrocelli. We were able to see in detail what they did with the space and how it's being used. I think that our feeling is that we're creating something that is based on what departments and programs that exist in our town have said they need. So that's where this comes from. It doesn't come from how other community centers are necessarily designed or what they're used for. It's what can't the library do right now because they don't have the space. They came up with the cooking classes. They want to be able to do that. So again, that's where all these program ideas came from, was all the different groups that we tapped into.
Thank you.
Yes?
There is a co-working project happening that's being privately developed in Woodbridge that you might not know about, so I'm just letting you know
Okay.
in case you had to sacrifice any aspect of the plan. It's a building in a former bank on Amity Road. It's been purchased, and a digital, there's a company in there now with a staff of 9, but they're renovating one floor of it to be co-work.
Okay. Thank you. I was not aware of that.
I wish I could remember the address. I went to the launch. The company's name is Verado, and the business person is named Matt Harris. He has a barn he's renovating in Passive House style up the street too in Bethany, and he owns that building now. I can't remember which bank.
Is that where the TD Bank was?
I think so.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Because part of this is also coordinating with other groups and partnering. So what will you have there? What won't you have there that we could maybe add to that? So again, that was a component of what could happen in the cafe or what could happen upstairs. But again, if there's another place to go, we don't want to compete, but we want to support what's underway. Yes?
Well, there's also another potential project in the fact that First Church is looking at repurposing its parish into doing similar kinds of things that this is talking about,
Okay.
but also some different things, well, potentially. I mean, the parish house, from its inception until recently, has always had a daycare / nursing school. So we're thinking of going back and doing that kind of thing, for use of that building.
Okay. Who is the best person to contact there?
Me,
Oh, and you are?
I'm Bill Moore,
Bill Moore. Okay. Thank you, Bill.
and I can give you contact info.
Okay, that would be very helpful afterwards. Diane?
Two things. First of all, I'm really not clear, wasn't clear about the parking and where that is and how accessible it can be. And then,
Okay.
I don't know if it's in conjunction with that, but I just want to understand if I was picturing
Sure.
it correctly, that this.
So the parking lot right out here, okay, would basically be turned so that it's along Newton Road and pushed more towards that building. And it would be angled parking, there would be 3 rows of that. And then the farthest part of that parking area would be a drop-off for the actual community
So
and cultural
that
center.
would accommodate about how many cars? I'm just sort of-
What is it, 26, I think, Eris?
I have it written down.
Okay.
Yeah, right now it would accommodate about 29 spaces, and we currently have about 16 out here.
And then it looked like the new entrance would be pretty close to Center Road.
No, it's actually, it's the entrance in the back off the asphalt parking area is really where the location is. But it's building an extension so that there's a separate way to enter the building and it's bigger and more welcoming. Right now, it's just a single door that you go through.
Right.
So it's not, it's kind of right in the center of the building. I don't know if you want to maybe
Okay.
show that, David?
It just looked like
Yeah.
it was.
So it's actually right here.
And where's Center Road then?
Okay, so Center Road is down here. Okay, is down here, and Newton is over
Okay.
here.
Then I'm all turned around.
Okay, so this,
Yeah, so you
go
can,
ahead.
Okay.
So-
It's on- it's on
yeah, so here's Newton Road,
Right.
here's Center Road. We're this far away from our
It's on the
entryway
outside.
to the street, so it's a good distance from,
Oh, okay. Okay. And then,
but it's visible. And the point is, it's visible, especially coming here, you'll see that defined entryway. You'll see parking that's nestled here.
and then how's the connection to the library?
The connection is a
And walking.
pedestrian
So
connection.
this is a walking path right
It's
here.
Right there, okay.
Okay, so all along here to the library.
Oh, and then I actually want to know about the materials. I know some of the renovation that's been done to the basic structure, but like, what kind of materials we do use for flooring, you know, thinking sustainability and,
Yes,
you know.
that will definitely be a focus, but go ahead, David.
Yeah, so our thoughts are potentially just scarifying or polishing the existing concrete floors, probably level them out, and that could also just have a nice honed finish on those floors. In the exercise room, for example, we would have a resilient type floor that would allow for ease of clean. That also would be a sustainable product that would be made out of recyclable pre-consumer and post-consumer materials. So to use the term, whether it's LVT, they call it luxury vinyl tile, those could come in different planks or sheets. Those would be adhered to the ground, and those would also
And
just
maybe bamboo for yoga.
bamboo is also a possibility for that, so the right choice there. In terms of the wall surface, we're going to try to preserve the brick that's there as opposed to sort of encapsulating some of that. So we would be cleaning that up. We'd be painting new surfaces. In terms of the ceilings, we want to keep some of the structure exposed, bring in acoustical material to help dampen that, but sort of keep all our mechanicals sort of hidden up above, and having nice light that's indirect and some direct light that can sort of shine up on the structure above. That's why we had these images here, to just try to give you a better sense of what we were thinking. So at least that gives you the sensibility of what we're trying to accomplish. Possibly in that cafe area, we would repolish the concrete floors. Very easy to clean. I think that would work well. And then you start seeing some other images here in terms of like that exposed brick, having the mechanical units topped up above and being exposed, and giving that type of feel to the space, and keeping it somewhat minimal, not trying to overdo it with a lot of moldings and applique. It's being honest to the original architecture that was there, that was utilitarian and adaptable, and that's really what all these spaces are intended to be.
Maintaining the character of the building is very important, and I think that's the way we do things in the town. Yes?
What about the historic roof over the Bay 1?
Yeah, so that is, that copper roof that was replaced during the fire is in good
Right, but
condition, and that would remain.
One of the things that we should consider is replacing it back to its historic look. If we're putting all this money into this building, I think that's very important. Now it just looks like it doesn't have any of the historic look anymore. What?
Isn't it a matter of just the number of years for it to kind of patina
Never
out?
mind about it.
I believe that roof was, when the fire was there, it was replaced in kind with a copper roof.
Right.
That's still, right now, it is at a point where it will start to patina green.
Right.
It was originally a green roof that you may recall. Right now, you're sort of at that brown stage. But that was a true copper standing seam roof that was replaced.
You know what the original building looked like?
Yes, and that was a copper standing seam roof.
No, but
green.
it was a peaked roof like this with windows all out on the side, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is a historic building. It's,
Right. So the Historical Society was involved in terms
Your
of that.
image looks like that front of the building, but you've never showed the front of the building as it currently exists, as the historic building. The image that you're showing with the two bay fire doors and a standing seam roof looks like the front of the building changed without the roof on it. So that, I think, is what's
Okay, that's
causing
where
the
it's,
problem.
okay.
You switched the.
It's the
imagery,
viewpoint,
and you
yeah.
haven't, you're no longer emphasizing the historic building, but you're using all the accretions of the back as the new building, basically.
Correct, because the entry will not be through that old bay, but
Really needed all of those tacked on bits of building at the back. You couldn't do without any of them.
Yeah, so those are those were additions that were part of what currently exists. So yes, the original building was just a rectangular shape.
Right.
There were two additions that were added.
Yeah, that's what I call an accretion.
Okay. I'll call them nodes, how about that? There were two. One, I think, was in the 60s, and I think the others were in the 70s. But either way, they both definitely turned their back on the original architecture. I agree with you there.
but if we're putting all this money into the building, we should return that Bay 1 roof.
Oh, it's still there.
it's still there. But I wrote that down as a comment.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Right, exactly,
Yeah,
correct,
okay.
absolutely right. It's
Right.
in the-
What?
We didn't see a picture of that.
Yeah, we did, so we didn't show you a view of A1, and the intent is to keep that to look exactly the way it is. The only difference that we're gonna do,
We don't want it to look like, just like it is.
No, no, it
We want it to
doesn't.
look the historic way.
Yeah, it's okay, but wait, it's okay.
Well, they're not telling us this.
Okay.
Teacher
Well,
said he
they're
wants
not
it to be like it
illustrating
is.
it, but.
Yeah, I
Right.
think they're looking for assurances that the old building will be the same old building.
yes, and that is the intent, with the two nodes that will also need to be refurbished. We are not demolishing them, and we're not changing those pieces, but the original building remains intact from the front view.
So Bay One is gonna have the old peak roof.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, there is no change to that at all.
Well, then, I think it would be good for you to, not
We
show,
should
Show a picture.
We
of
could
that.
render that from that other
not
perspective.
show the picture you show there, that's completely different than what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
understood.
So,
Okay, yes.
And then beautiful palladium windows too.
I would like to know what happens in the center building now that would either be changed or augmented with the addition of this building?
So, I mean, in the center building, you have human services, okay, you have the police department. I know there is a group that is actually looking at, you're probably involved in that also, David, the use and, renovation of that building.
Oh, okay, because there's on the second floor, I have no idea what happens up there. The senior center is being renovated for the lower level,
Correct,
and then there's a daycare center in the same wing.
Yes.
right, and then there's
all that other stuff, I have no idea what's up there.
So human services,
Okay.
human services is there, the food bank, room 16, okay, that's all on that level. It actually goes right into the fitness center that's there and then the police station.
Okay. I
So
just
that's
had
the,
no idea.
that's the
Come
connection.
visit, so that's going on.
Yes.
Yeah, mainly the second level is the daycare, mainly up on the second level, pretty much.
Right, so yeah, so there's yoga and Tai Chi in room 16,
Right,
every day.
And human
Yeah.
services.
Every day.
yes.
Very exciting, potential, love it. Yoga teacher, Tai Chi instructor. Is there gonna be air conditioning, fans,
Yes,
heating?
Yes.
yes,
You know?
Yeah.
yes.
And as far as the, keeping the doors open and stuff, we love that idea. Any way of screening for insects and stuff, are we gonna take that into consideration for,
That's a good thought.
I mean?
Yeah, so one way to address that is through an air curtain
Okay.
that just sort of blows downward, and that's, you may see that in restaurants now, because that's, the concern of everyone loves the open door concept, but they're problematic with insects and such. So you just blow an air curtain down, and that sort of addresses the need for, or the concern with that.
And also, you've probably seen us doing yoga and Tai Chi outside in front of the building or on the side of the building.
Yep.
Be great to have a space for that outside too.
Yeah, and that oval I showed on that previous concept. So right here is a perfect
Space.
space just for that.
And even the amphitheater on the other side of the library would also work for that.
Great,
Yes, Ben.
thank you.
Thank you.
The parking lot is that pink color, is that going to be interlocking or is that going to be tarred? The parking lot?
So the parking lot meaning interlocking,
Yeah.
the question is what material would we use?
Right.
Yeah, we're proposing a modular, just like you see here in this image. We want to use something like these brick pavers. Those joints allow for all the water to infiltrate below, and that allows us to deal with stormwater. So we're not just paving a hard surface that goes to a catch basin that then goes to storm drainage. We're going to try to control as much of our stormwater on site, and that's a good strategy to do so.
Great.
It's a permeable parking lot.
Yeah.
That's what it's called. And
So two comments. One is sort of getting to, I think you said this earlier, and getting to the historic nature.
Uh-huh.
Since that is, if you're driving up Center Road,
Yes.
that's what you see.
yes.
Maybe there should be some sort of gorgeous sign along a retaining wall or whatever there that says Woodbridge Town Center, whatever, a little arrow around the corner, whatever it is, but something that identifies it so that draws you to look at the old historical building, which is so, nice looking. The other thing I question is the pavilion, because it doesn't look huge to me. There's the Rotary Pavilion, of course, but that's in the middle of the woods. So, maybe should it be tipped in the other direction, which would make the oval able to be a little bigger if it was, turned 90 degrees the other way, more parallel to the parking?
So it's definitely possible, it might make sense to be turning it those 90 degrees, but the size of it is right now 60 by 30. And in theory, it can accommodate about 80 people. But, the guide I've been using in terms of pavilion capacity has been what the Connecticut Deep website has for their pavilion sizes. So it's really going to be you can get a lot of people in tight spaces if you want to. And I think one thing that wasn't mentioned was we are considering adding heating to the pavilion. So during even cooler periods, when it's rainy like this, there's no reason to be not using that space.
Well, my comment to the positioning was more to just make, like, the oval could then be bigger. The green oval of grass and stuff.
Would you orient that for any reason on a particular angle, or we could, that could be adjusted?
There was reason. There's always like 10 reasons why I do things in these drawings. But part of it was also kind of where the horseshoes and the bocce is. It kind of becomes this passive recreation space, and then this other side, kind of that triangle, is thinking, okay, we might have grills there, and this is kind of more the run-around space. So it was intended to kind of create separation between those spaces. Plus, north is directly up here, so that would be good orientation if we put solar panels on that roof. But and it's, plus we do have to kind of figure out exactly where each of the trees are, because there's one of the things they're always saying, I work hard to protect trees, and we actually save a lot and can build quite close to them, but we have to know exactly which trees we're going to keep, because some of them are like native cherries that grew up and don't give that much value, like an oak tree, which is home to like hundreds of moths and things like that.
So during further development, this plan may need to tweak just based on what vegetation is there, what we need to keep. There is also a variety of rocks that are growing out of the ground there, and we want to sort of preserve that, and we think that's interesting. It's a great place to play and jump off of and things like that. So I know this concept plan doesn't show all of that, but in further development, if we got to that point, we would take advantage of what's already in place.
Speaking of development and the phases of planning, how long did it take you to get to this point? Like what's been the planning process? And I'm sorry if I missed it.
Oh, that's okay. We started in May of last year,
Oh.
and then we solicited all the program ideas from the different departments. And then had a meeting with the department heads in November, Board of Selectmen in December, now with the public, and we're going to go back to the Board of Selectmen.
So May of 2022?
Yeah.
Is this an ARPA project?
No.
No,
Okay, thanks.
It's a state grant, but it is not an ARPA project. I also just want to make clear that the $2 million in the state grant that we have is for the building itself, and to making that into a community and cultural center. That does not include a lot of the outdoor space. So we felt, though, that we needed a conceptual plan, a master plan, because how could we determine where's the entrance to the building? How does it interface with everything else? So to us, this is a very important component combined together. But the funding that we have is for the interior of the building. So, Barbara?
Yes, I have two questions, one of which you may have answered and I didn't hear.
Can you talk just a
I'm
little
sorry.
louder?
I have two questions, one of which you may have answered. Upstairs of the original building, the large, you talked about bathrooms and the stairways and so forth, but the large main portion of that, what did you conceive that might be used for? The green.
So the two images, and we tried to give some parallel in terms of the geometry, but probably the one in the middle gives you a sense of what we're trying to do. This image is a little narrower, but we want to preserve the existing wood floor that's in place and try to repair as much as we can if possible, and reclaim that wood. We want to reclad those walls. Most of that was removed as part of the fire, so we're probably going to have to create new and reclad that with a sort of shiplap cladding. There used to be old oak cladding that was there. And let's get back to that image. And we want to introduce lighting, and also, as you can see, there's some ceiling fans up there and such. So bring back that meeting room for its same type of concept, but that could be adaptable for tables and chairs with a lecture. That could be used for a yoga studio. That could be used for exhibit space.
So really, all three of your, or four, including this, of your main large spaces, you're saying can be used for any one of these things that you're, and others.
Exactly, Barbara. That was really the key design principle, is flexible use of space.
Okay. The other question is entirely different. What is going to happen to this abomination out here? The air conditioning and so forth for the library, but it's just horrendous.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Landscaping?
The noise.
It's creating buffers,
It's-
yeah.
It's horrible.
It's gonna remain.
And I assume you're gonna have the same problem with the building you're working on.
Well,
Another,
the generator stays, which is the big brown fence. The AC units we can screen. It becomes much harder to muffle that noise. There are materials to put up that can muffle that, but it becomes much more difficult. Now, something to counter that is you introduce a new noise, like water. And suddenly you start drowning out other noises using something like water. Do we have a solution figured out yet? No. Is it something we want to look at and keep at the, at the top of the list? Yes.
and an equal set of machinery will be used for,
So right now, as part of that initial enabling phase that I mentioned that was completed in 2019, those are, there's rooftop units that are positioned on both of those nodes, both of those bays. Those are there now. They're relatively quiet of equipment, I think, compared to what you have here for this large building. All the other mechanical equipment that will be in the building is inside. It's very small condensing units that we're doing, electrified equipment and so forth. So those can be screened, and just the acoustical output of those are fairly minor. So I think we are addressing that piece of it. It's not going to be to the order of magnitudes that's here, and we're going to try to screen it with vegetation. I think is the best way of tackling it.
We have one more question, and then I think we're going to have to end. The library closes at 8.
I know there's been some already preliminary conversations about planning, budgeting, finances, and so on. And more than likely, there's going to be more of that, right? But my main question is, what is the estimated time of beginning the project and finishing?
So, we're actually going to we're taking all of the suggestions that you made here this evening. They're really very helpful, and those will help inform kind of the final plans that we present to the Board of Selectmen with construction costs on February 8th. If they go ahead and approve the project, then the construction drawings will be developed by Silva Petrocelli. Those will be put out to bid. Hopefully by July, we will be able to select who is going to do the construction. They will then get all the materials they need and hopefully start sometime in August. And we anticipate then the following early spring that we would be done and ready to open the building in 2024.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. So I just want to repeat one more time, if you have any more ideas, comments, suggestions, please email Jerry Shaw, who's the executive assistant for the town. Her email is gshaw@woodbridgect.org. And we will get back to you, we will catalog those, and we'll use those in terms of putting together our final presentation.
Are these plans someplace?
The plan, this presentation is going to be on the town website. Okay, so you can go back and look at that, and as I said, you can watch this on Channel 79 or on
But I
YouTube.
meant like, is there, like in the is there a place in the library for
We had not planned on that, but we can do that. We can make a paper copy of it, and people can come and take a look at it. We can do several copies of that. That's a great idea. Okay.